Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. We are buzzing as always, coming in hot from Dubai. If you're wondering why I'm wearing a stupid old Canada hoodie, I understand and empathize with your sentiment. I did this travel on late notice and I forgot to pack a hoodie. So I was at the airport and I was like, damn, can't really travel without a hoodie. And my options were few and far in between. And I got soaked for, what was it, like 60 bucks Canadian at the shitty little airport store. And that's why I'm wearing a stupid Canada hoodie. And of course, in Dubai, it's hot as shite. But when you're inside, you gotta turn the AC on. And now I'm quite cold. Anyways, enough about me. Super pumped to have today's guest on the show, Robinson Burkey, co-founder of the one and only Wormhole Foundation. He's been in the crypto game since 2021, and before joining Wormhole Foundation, he held a key position at Acala, where he spearheaded biz dev and ecosystem efforts within the Polkadot ecosystem. As co-founder, he is dedicated to accelerating the foundation's growth trajectory and fostering the widespread adoption of Wormhole as the leading interoperability platform powering multi-chain apps and bridges at scale. Everyone knows who Wormhole is, so I don't need to get into it, but if you haven't heard of them, they are trusted and used by teams like BlackRock, Apollo, VanEck, Google Cloud, Circle, and Uniswap, and the platform has enabled over 60 billion in all-time multi-chain volume, the most of any protocol in the world. Robinson, welcome to the show, my friend. Pumped to have you on. How you doing this lovely, morning for you, I guess it would be. How you doing this lovely morning?
I'm doing great. I mean, after that intro, I'm fired up. Let's go. But yeah, I'm doing great, Matt. Thanks for having me on. Excited to chat today.
Likewise, mate. Likewise. Before the show, you and I were shooting the shit. You're back in New York City right now. Crypto capital of the world, undisputed, I think. I started the pod in 2021, had some guests come on from New York City. They were like, oh, New York City sucks. I'm going to Austin. I'm going to Dubai. I'm going to Florida. I'm going to Singapore. I'm going to anywhere but New York. But holy heck, the tables have turned. New York is so back. And I think it's undoubtedly the crypto capital of the world right now. And I'd love to hear your 2 cents on that.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny, before we started recording, we were talking, I totally get the hoodie and the hot environment vibe. I'm originally from South Florida, and it's, hot as shite down there as well. But the thing is like everyone runs their AC, it'll be like, in the 60s Fahrenheit, but you go from outside, it's like 80s, 90s. So it's always this like crazy shift in temperature. But yeah, I mean, look, New York, I think, and I said this before, New York is going through what I would consider it's like Silicon Valley moment, but for crypto, right? Yeah. Like you had this era in Silicon Valley or San Francisco, the Bay Area, where there was, this brain drain of talent. You have Stanford, you have Berkeley, you have like the kind of internet boom, if you will, on the applications that came after that. Call it like early 2000s or, early 2010s into the mid 2010s. That's obviously changed a little bit, but New York's very much so having that, but for crypto, right? You have, when we think of like brain drain or like this, like where the talent's coming from, it's one of the financial capitals of the world. Obviously, when you think about crypto, a lot of people will talk about SocialFi, GameFi, but realistically, the best thing that crypto is doing today, or the product market fit that it has today, is an alternative financial system. So you have all this kind of financial talents that can make an easy transition for a lot of DeFi applications, et cetera. And I mean, look, we opened an office in Flatiron. There's a bunch of L1s. I think Monad is there. Injective has offices. Solana, Uniswap has an office there. I think Aave does. So the list goes on, and it's very much so, I would say, the center of crypto. And I would potentially argue the center of crypto right now, at least in the world.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I was in New York a couple of weeks ago. It's just such an electric factory. I love that place. Also, New York, one of the few cities where when you go on vacation, I felt, and I still had to grind, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, but it's a place that's fun, but you also haul ass, like I feel like it's the epitome of work hard, play hard. Whereas like, you go to LA or you go to Miami and you're like, no one does shit here, it's a completely different vibe. So there's
as someone that's lived in all three, I could definitely attest to that. And I mean, look, vacation for us as builders usually always involves a little bit of work here and there. And it's all hard to unplug fully, for sure. And New York makes 100%. It harder.
Yeah. No, it wasn't an electric factory. Let's go back to 2021 Wormhole to 2025 Wormhole. Interoperability, I feel like in 2021 was a big buzzword, now I don't feel like it's as big of a buzzword because it actually works, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm way off there, but like back in the day, tons of folks would come in the pod, talk about interoperability, this, interoperability, that. I remember
Yep.
writing the word interoperability so many times, and I don't write it down that much anymore because I feel like shit works. Walk me through sort of the journey of 2021 Wormhole to today Wormhole, and just how far you guys have come, and sort of, tie that into just the word interoperability and how things are finally starting to work and be interoperable in crypto.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with maybe the word interoperability and get in a little bit to the history, if you will. Interoperability is a concept. It's not new per se, right? It's just the idea of these different systems interoperating with one another, and we see this in other industries as well, right? You could see this in the banking system, what we're trying to upgrade, if you will. You have different banks, let's say Bank of America and Chase Bank, or Novo Banco in Portugal, whatever it is, and they need a way to talk to each other. So that's usually a wire transfer done typically by like Swift, I think is a good example. You have, cloud servers that need to interoperate. You have transportation services that need to interoperate. So it's this thing we see throughout life and have seen for a while. And it's just that general concept. And we're essentially taking that concept and applying it to blockchains. But you're very right. Back in 2021, it was kind of the promise of eventually all this interoperability is going to need to happen. And, crypto is very good at like promising a future, I think. And if you actually, rewind back to that period of time, you'll remember that the concept of multi-chain in general was actually pretty controversial. If
It
you
was,
went on
yeah.
crypto Twitter, or anything, it was kind of like, I think everything's going to be built on Ethereum. Or and then the thought process evolved to, I think everything's going to be built on Ethereum L2s and settle to Ethereum. And now we're at this point where it's like undoubtedly multi-chain, right? Not only do we have Solana, Sui, Barachain, Monad, name your like alternative L1 or different L1, but we have Stripe launching a chain,
Yeah.
right? We
Google.
have Circle launching a chain. We have Google launching a chain.
Yeah.
JP Morgan has a private chain. The private chains need to get connected to the public chains, right? So
Yeah.
there is just no argument you could possibly make that says we aren't in a multi-chain world. And so I think there's a little bit, we're fortunate that we always thought that this direction was going to happen, but we, of course, a little bit is taking a bet, and the bet we took ultimately paid off, right? We thought there was going to be many settlement layers, many chains, many different app specific chains. And so we kind of went from, and for those who aren't familiar, we started connecting Ethereum and Solana, right? Like that was all we were doing at the beginning. It was like, oh my gosh, there's this new L1. We were obviously pretty involved with Solana early days. We have the namesake for the first Solana hackathon ever. It's the Wormhole Solana hackathon. And we just connected Ethereum and Solana. We just made sure the assets could flow between them. And you fast forward today, we trying to connect all the chains and really make it so you don't have to worry as much about this kind of fragmentation issue. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but as we start to get more into like the institutional side of things and talking to these banks and working with them, they think on chain. You probably heard, I don't know, Matt, you've probably seen like different founders of different chains say like on chain meaning their chain. I think Base does this a lot. They say on chain meaning Base. When I say on chain, and when an institution thinks on chain, it should be all the chains, not just one.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Just to sort of set the table for the folks who aren't as familiar with interoperability here, what are some of the, I guess, again, this is quite simplistic, but we'll make it simple and we'll dumb it down. What are some of the biggest present day issues with interoperability, the shit show of moving assets from one chain to another, the bridges? I mean, without Wormhole and a couple other great interoperability providers, allowing things to transfer from chain 1 to chain 2, chain A to chain B. It's nightmare fuel. It's where hacks happen. It's where things go to die. We need to fix it. Set the stage, tell us a little bit about the problem and then the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about blockchain, or like if you're thinking about anything happening on a blockchain today, blockchains at their very basic form are just these shared ledgers. So it's literally like all these different transactions, and then you have multiple ledgers, right? You have Ethereum is kind of a shared state, a lot of people will call it, or shared ledger. You have Solana, and that just number increases quite a bit to where today we have probably like 15 chains that are doing 85% of the transaction volume, but that's still 15 separate ledgers that need to coordinate all these different activities. And so what Wormhole is essentially doing, I like to think of it as almost like this decentralized accounting system. So it's saying, Robinson is going to send 10 USDC that exists on Ethereum and send it to Matt to his wallet on Solana, right? And so you need a way for Ethereum that doesn't talk to a Solana to talk to each other. And Wormhole's that like accounting or translation layer, if you will, to make sure that you can verify that that is true. And so when you think about that, it's really just a message. It's just like accounting. It's just something that's saying like, this is true. Make sure it reflects on the ledger over here. And so the main use case that has come out of this is asset transfers. There's other stuff that cross-chain messaging can do, like with that core primitive. And again, I would think of it as a stack, like middleware. So it's the base layer.
Yeah.
But the main application is asset transfers. So Matt, you've been in the space a while. You probably remember back in 2020, there's a lot of bridges. And what happened is all this stuff is permissionless, right? So what you get is you get a bunch of what we call liquidity fragmentation. So if you're a user listening right now, think about opening your wallet, and maybe you're not even crypto native. Think about opening your mobile bank account. You go to that and you see the currency that you're using, right? But unfortunately, there's actually 3 or 4 different types of the same currency that can't be used together, right? That's what we call liquidity fragmentation. So the way we saw this in crypto is you open your wallet and there's 4 different versions of USDC. There's 4 different versions of USDT. There's 3 different versions of Ethereum on Solana,
Rob,
right?
So the sort of cut you off. The analogy I give for like I'll give it for the Americans because the Canadian one's a little fucky, but that's like if there was a different currency for every state. Like that would just be so stupid. Like you're in Florida, you have friggin', Gator dollars. You go to New York, you have, actual dollars. You go to LA, or Cali, you have beach dollars. Like that is so friggin' stupid. That's literally what it's like in crypto right now. Like you're still in the same country, you're doing the same thing, but every time you go to a different state, you got to change shit around. That makes no sense.
I am absolutely stealing that. I don't know how I've never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. Like it really didn't make sense. And I think what happened is the industry scaled fast, right? We were just launching blockchains right and left, and bridges were trying to capture all this market share, and each bridge technically issues a different asset. And so you just had this kind of like explosion of like tech and not really thoughtful ways of what the second, third order consequences would be. And then you had all this liquidity fragmentation. But I think the next thing to think about is like the user experience is bad, but there's also a layer under that that's bad too, which is the developer. So thinking about any blockchain, the way I think about them is like, just like in life, you need like a financial infrastructure for everything else on top of it to happen, right? So you need a way to exchange money, you need a way to borrow, lend money, these types of things. That's why every blockchain that launches typically starts with the main DEX, a main money market, a main way to take leverage, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, 100%.
If you are building one of those, right? So you're building something on Sui or building something on Berachain, and there's 4 different versions of USDC. Which one do you choose? What if there's 2 exchanges and they each choose a different one, and your liquidity is not as deep, therefore your trades aren't as good, therefore the user experience is worse, and on goes kind of the problem. And so that, I would say, is a long-winded way, Matt, of like describing the problem or what was created of it. On the one hand, you had this connectivity, which was great. I could send my assets back and forth. But on the second hand, you had, 4 or 5 different versions every time you did that. And so today where we've gotten to, which I think is exciting, is what I would call the end game for specifically asset interoperability. So like sending assets between different chains. And what that is what we call Wormhole's NTT standard. Think about like SPL, ERC20, these kind of like token standards specific to a given chain. Wormhole's NTT is kind of like a standard specific to like moving between chains. So it's a way in which you can essentially have one version on each chain, and then in the middle of those contracts on each chain, you can aggregate all the messaging or bridges, if you will. So you're not creating a bunch of different versions. There's only one contract that's minting, one contract that's burning, and you can again aggregate everything. So this eliminates the problem at its core because you don't have a bunch of bridges creating different versions of different contracts. They're all aggregated into one. And so now you have this more unified experience. And now we have these institutions saying, this makes sense to us. We're going to issue assets. And we also want those assets to move between the chains because we think this is kind of a future-proof standard.
Yeah, very well said there. I mean, heck, let's just take a quick jig and jag. Let's talk about some of we'll bring it home base for you guys in USA. That I mean, this was crazy. The White House crypto policy report, the admins focus on interoperability, absolutely crucial. And I mean, this literally validates your guys' infrastructure approach. How pumped were you guys to see that come out? I mean, that must have been huge.
Yeah, I mean, it is huge. And if you think about it, is there's this huge need for standardization with interoperability too. What is the White House excited about? I mean, number one is stablecoins. We're probably tired of hearing them at this point, but because we've heard about them so much, it kind of means that there's a good bit of product market fit, right? There's a lot of companies launching, a lot of new stablecoins launching. I mean, the White House even launched their own. But if we think about stablecoins, what's the next thing that's super important for a stablecoin? You need a chain to issue on, and then you need a provider to make sure that stablecoin can exist across the entire, I would call it the on-chain financial ecosystem, which is becoming bigger and bigger, just like the standard financial system. And so, making sure that there is standardization and compliance when it comes to interoperability, because like you said earlier, Matt, this is an area, or historically was an area of risk, right? It was an area of attack vectors, exploits, et cetera. And so making sure that there's compliant ways in which protocols can become more of like an approved protocol, can become compliant, et cetera, is extremely important. And specifically when it comes to stable coins, obviously we've seen the Genius Act, and I think we're going to see more and more stable coins, and they're going to need to use these interoperability protocols in order to be successful. So that's really exciting. And I think, other news recently was the administration wanting to actually put economic data on chain. They chose Chainlink and they chose Pith to help them do that, which are well-known oracles in the space. A lot of people don't know this, Matt, but Pith is entirely built on Wormhole. So Pith works with financial.
That either. I got to do my homework.
Yeah, Pith
Okay.
works with financial institutions to broadcast data on a fork of Solana. It's called PithNet. And then Wormhole essentially picks up those high quality price feeds. This all happens very fast and brings them to over 100 chains. And so we're essentially being a provider for Pith that was obviously selected by the administration for this economic data, and to bring that to additional chains if needed. Right now it's going to be on Ethereum. So we're bringing it essentially from PithNet to Ethereum, which is super exciting. Obviously, we're just getting more and more involved with the administration as kind of time goes on.
Yeah, well said. Mate, you're on a roll here. We got to take a quick break. Give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show. Also, it looks like you're crushing a Coke or a Diet Coke. I'm so jealous. I've been off the Cokes or the Diet Cokes, but oh man, a good crispy DC absolutely hits. We'll get into that after, but huge shout out to Prime XBT, longtime friends and longtime sponsors of the Crypto News podcast, who are the team at Prime XBT, as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. Doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet. You can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is also running an exclusive promo for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. Use the promo code CryptoNews50. That's CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, that's CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Mate, when I had you on back in December for round one, you had a couple hot takes. No, not even hot takes. I guess I don't want to say it was consensus, but
Let's revisit them.
You really hammered this point home. This was before the parabolic, circle IPO run up and everything. You and I agreed, but you really had a good riff on stablecoins being the killer use case for crypto. Turned out that was a darn good take. I know you couldn't really bet on that with stablecoins, besides the fact if you caught the Circle IPO. I mean, Goldman and the other banks sort of screwed us on everyone there, as it IPO'd at 30, actually went public at whatever it was, 100 and something, classic banks. But regardless, let's tie it into interoperability. One thing that I absolutely hate, and you just said this too, USDC on one chain going to USDC on another chain. Someone sends me USDT on Tron. I need to send someone USDT on ETH. It's an absolute shit show. Is there ever going to be a day where there's just like one single chain, like Tether coming out with their own L1? Is this going to sort of change the game forever? What's your take on, sort of unified and very, not even interoperable, but just a singular layer of stablecoins, like there's only one US dollar?
Yeah.
You think that's going to happen?
Yeah. I do think a lot of it will be abstracted away, and there'll be kind of like one transacting dollar, so to speak, and then a lot of the swaps in the background. But I want to touch on the asset issuance piece. So a lot of times in crypto, we think things are new, and there's actually we've had enough history to actually see that there's certain things have been tried before. I think a good example is the asset issuer now launching a chain. I think a good example in the Cosmos ecosystem, you actually saw this a lot because it was an app chain ecosystem. Everyone wanted to be like the asset issuance chain. I think
Yeah.
Noble is still around and is doing I think they work closely with Circle, so they're the main issuer of USDC there. They've issued a few other stable coins. I know there was a chain called Kava that tried to be like the USDT, issuance chain. And then there was another one that wanted to be Atom. And we saw something similar in Polkadot. And what happened is like they kind of had the app chain thesis right in a way, or at least the fact that there will be multiple chains and they would need to be interoperable. But it just didn't, and we could probably have a whole podcast on why those didn't necessarily work. Obviously, they're still around and they still have activity going on, etc. But what we're actually seeing is that those tiny ecosystems play out on a grander scale, right? So
Yeah.
all these alternative L1s were wormholes, actually the messaging, not IBC. And instead of like Cosmos app chains, there's just like L2s, L1s, and they're all being connected almost like the Cosmos vision originally, but at this grander scale. And Plasma is a good
Yeah.
example, obviously, of like the USDT app chain. And I do think we'll see more of this, right? Obviously, it's an easy thing to say. We saw ARC with Circle, who actually designed their consensus very similar to what Wormhole's done, which I think is interesting and telling that we had a good idea of how things should run, years ago. And then obviously we have Plasma, and I think we'll see more of these issuance chains. But the end state really is something like there'll be a few kind of transacting stables, and of course the environment you're in, you'll transact in that one, right? Like if you're using JPMC coin, you'll be, when you're in their environment, whatever it is, you're going to use
Yeah.
that. But
Sure.
here's where wormholes really interesting is that we are the settlement in the background, right? So I'll walk you through, like I'll walk the audience through an example. Polymarket, very exciting. People love to use it. Polymarket accepts USDC on Polygon, right? If I come to the Polymarket and I have USDT on Plasma, I don't want to have to go to another website, swap my USDT into USDC, and then send it to get
No.
it to Polygon somehow. It's actually like a
Do it
pretty
on
horrible process.
do it on the
Yes,
front end. Do it on the front
exactly.
end.
So now we're at the place where I have USDT, and in like a couple click transaction on the front end, I can go from USDT on Plasma to settle on USDC on Polygon. So I would argue that we're largely there for the more sophisticated and popular apps. And then for certain DeFi protocols that are more niche, they're still like do a lot of stuff in the wallet, right? I think there's also going to be kind of a hot take of like, will the wallet become the place where everything happens, or will it be front ends like Polygon and then like plugging into widgets? I'd probably argue that a little bit more than the actual wallet, which I think a lot of people would disagree with me. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is like we are actually getting close to an end state where I can come to Polymarket, connect a wallet, or maybe it's my, I do some sort of auth in with, and then it's connected to a wallet and I have my email. And then I only have USDT on Plasma, but I can still place that bet, and but Polymarket will get the USDC on Polygon, which is what they accept. So we actually working with a lot of teams right now. We call it settlement, not a new term. It's a very financial term, but the idea is that like there's going to be a shitload of stable coins, and a lot of people are going to want to accept what they want to accept, and that can be on any chain, any type of stable coin. And then the other people are going to come to the merchant with whatever they have. Like it's going to be X, Y, and Z stablecoin, and you got to make sure there's liquidity and routing to trade those. So I think we're getting close, and a lot of front ends already have a good experience.
Well said there. Just hammering away notes. Okay, hot takes. Again, round one was a blast. You had a couple good hot ones. Also, one of my favorite analogies of all time. I've stolen this analogy, and I've told everyone that, and I don't just use Wormhole as the example. I know you said Wormhole is the Panama Canal, of liquidity routing and whatnot. So you can steal mine of the US dollars in different states, so on and so forth. Give me a couple. Yeah, it's all you. Give me a couple hot takes though. Like, give me some spicy shit before we let you go. What any ecosystems, any protocols, anything that you think is going to happen over the next 4 months before year ends?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the hot topic right now is digital asset treasuries, right? I think a lot of what these digital asset treasuries are essentially a way for the public market to get access. It's to get access to more buyers. It's very similar to the thought process of an ETF, right? So what we're seeing right now is just a race for every protocol to get some sort of digital asset treasury in place via a pipe, via SPAC, et cetera. So I think that's a very interesting area right now. And so a lot of the takes are Sol, ETH, BTC will probably be fine, right? You have these big majors, they'll trade above the NAV, they'll be, or the MNAV, and they'll be kind of like successful, if you will. And then the kind of longer tail of tokens will come along and soonly trade below. And as the market kind of turns, like it won't look so good. And maybe even some of these bigger digital asset treasuries will buy the smaller ones and dump the tokens, which makes it even worse. Here's maybe more of a hot take I think that's interesting to watch. I think that for a while, crypto has been kind of put in this position where for regulatory arbitrage reasons, you need to set up a lot of entities, right? You need to set up foundations, you need to set up labs, you need to set up maybe multiple labs. What I think will be interesting to watch, and maybe a bet I will take, is that some of these digital asset treasuries will become more than treasuries and will become the crypto companies themselves. And I think it will be a good way to reduce the overhead of running multiple entities because of this regulatory arbitrage that, a lot of these companies have needed to adhere to. And so what I mean by that is quite literally these companies, maybe, again, this is a hot take, this is speculation, in order to say, hey, why should you trade above the net asset value? Well, you should trade above the net asset value because all the employees are now part of this company. All the IP is now part of this company, et cetera, et cetera. And now you go from having, and of course there's, securities laws concern. I think the market structure bill will give us good insight into, but you go from having these like offshored entities to now onshoring them within the US. I know that Canada's doing this as well, but talking about the US stats in particular, now you're able to onshore a lot of these entities. Not only are you able to give public market access, but consolidate potentially what has been a lot of operational overhead. A lot of the DATs are saying they will do this in the future. I think some will start to need to say we need to do this up front in order to show that there's more value and why they should trade above the NAV. So that's I think a very interesting area of crypto for me personally to watch. I think the hot take here is maybe that this will happen. It's I don't think we've seen it yet. I think some people have been talking about it, but we'll see. It's a fun area to watch, like I said.
I love it. I mean, I work for HLQ Strategy, first company in the world to put hype on the balance sheet. And I completely agree with pretty much everything you said. I feel like you're I don't want to say a hype guy. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I'm obviously biased. I think hype and Hyperliquid is awesome, but that's what need to evolve. That's what needs to evolve. And you can't just hold the underlying asset. You need to hold more than the underlying asset. You need to be a builder and a groover and an incubator within the ecosystem. And you need to have different plays. You can't just be, a one-trick pony. And I completely agree with your take regarding, moving a lot of the employees and IP and assets not on-chain, off-chain, but still sort of on-chain within this investment vehicle. And again, all it's going to take as a couple more of these parabolic crypto run-ups. Retail will get FOMO again. Institutions will get FOMO instead of them, onboarding and KYBing with exchanges, blah, 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 so on and so forth. It's going to be so much easier for them to just hammer the buy button, So I think it's still, I do think most of these will get wrecked. One thing I will say for the listeners, in the DAT space, and I'm not, at least I spoke with my competitors in the Hyperliquid ecosystem, they're all awesome. There are some other people in the space who have raised good amount of money and they don't even know how to set up let's say a Coinbase account to go buy that crypto. So there's a lot of TradFi folks who are just riding this wave and have no clue what they're doing in the crypto ecosystem. If you're going to invest in a DAT, make sure they have experience in both. And guys, above all else, look at the funding structure. You have to look at how they got this money in. Was it greasy funding? Did they do an in-kind swap? Did they do an equity swap for the token swap? You got to look at all that stuff.
Are they locked tokens?
Yes.
Yeah.
You got to look at all that. Anyways, mate, always a pleasure. I love doing these with you. We'll have to do round 3 soon. Last time I had you on, I'm pretty sure you were at your parents' place in South Florida. You were somewhere in South Florida. You had a sick background.
The AC was pumping too. I was freezing. I was probably wearing a hoodie even though it was 80
No,
out.
I think you were in the lanai room. I think you were you had like a pond in the background, I think, or like a sick little lake. I was like, damn, that looks awesome. Anyways, look, appreciate you coming on, mate. Before you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you personally and, of course, Wormhole online and on socials?
Absolutely. You can find me at Robinson on Twitter. So just my first name. It's like a last name, but it is my first name. And then Wormhole, you can find at Wormhole or wormhole.com. We've got all the domains there. So follow any one of those. Speaking of Hyperliquid, Matt, we're live on Hyperliquid as well. So if you have assets on other chains, you want to send them, over, please feel free. Go to portalbridge.com. And yeah, always a pleasure, man. Looking forward to the next one.
Likewise. Also, guys, before we let him go, what a flex having your first name on Twitter. I had a guy reach out to me not too long ago. He's like, hey, do you want Matt on Twitter? I was like, sure, how much? He's like, 250K. I was like, buddy,
that's wild.
If you think I'm paying you 250 racks to get my first name, you can go fly a kite. Anyways, huge shout out to Robinson Burkey, co-founder of Wormhole Foundation, bringing the heat as always. Love having him on for round 2. Can't wait for round 3. If you guys enjoyed this one, I hope you did. Please do subscribe, hammer that like button. It would mean the world to my team and I. Speaking to the team, love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. And back to the listeners, you guys are the best. Keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Keep on growing those bags and keep on touching a little bit of grass before it gets too cold. Love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Ciao.